You're toxic. I'm slipping. Alright. Okay. And we have Mike. Cool. We have everything up. Great. Alright. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all having a good Tuesday, February the 4th, 2025, as best as you can be. Tonight on Live Deck Building, we're going to be doing a Bant Creatures build suggested by a patron and voted on by the Discord. This is Bernard Ginger Sculptor. It's a Bant 4-drop legendary human artificer. And this little 3/3 says that each creature you control that's a food or a golem gets +2/+2 and trample. And whenever another non-token creature you control would die, you can choose to exile it instead, and you make a little 1/1 food golem out of it that's a copy of the creature. And that creature is not going to be a 1/1 because Bernard says that foods and golems you got +2/+2 and trample. So you're going to make a little trampoly 3/3 version of whatever thing just died. We are in weird colors because we do care about death triggers. We are exiling the thing that does die. And we're not in black. We care about death triggers and we're not in black tonight, y'all. Excuse me. So if you have a suggestion for our Bernard Ginger Sculptor, please put it in the comments, y'all. So because Bernard cares about tokens, Bernard makes complex tokens. He makes little food artifact versions of the thing that die. So we are going to run Doubling Season. Doubling Season just simply is the quintessential token doubler in green. It's a 5-drop enchantment. It was just reprinted in the Foundations. And this thing says if you would put counters on stuff, or if you would make tokens, you make twice the amount of that thing instead. It's great. It's $35, even though it was just seen a reprint. This thing's cool, though. Yeah. It's great. Recommend a proxy, though. It's a pricey card, y'all. If you have any suggestions for our Bant tokens build, we're making some complex tokens with our boy Bernard over here. Bernard is a little 4-drop Bant creature, and he says that foods and golems we control get +2/+2 and they got trample. And, yeah. And when things die, we can exile them and make them food golems. Gunnar! Hey, Gunnar, good to see you. Gunnar, every time I see your profile picture, I'm like, damn, he's handsome. And I'm like, he has a snake. And it's a wild snake. Like, I don't know. Thanks for hanging out, Gunnar. This is Oshir Talk, suggested by Gunnar, who has a snake. He is a 6-drop god creature that came out in the Caverns of Ixalan expansion. This thing says that you triple the amount of creature tokens you produce. This thing's worded a little trickily. It doesn't triple all tokens produced. It only triples creature tokens. So this thing's great. This thing was printed. It's $40. It's got a few different arts. I think this is the cheaper art, if I'm not mistaken. Also, Ojar Talk has a death trigger. So it kind of conflicts a little bit with our commander because this thing can just flip back into a land. And we were playing a game with the patron members on Sunday night during Sunday Night Magic. If you want to play Sunday Night Magic with me, head to the Discord. We're going to do a schedule we're going to be putting out, I think, tomorrow. And yeah, he was playing Bernard, and his Bernard build had a lot of legendary creatures, and he had a lot of token doublers, and it kind of non-bowed off of Ogier Talk. He thought he was going to make like 4 copies and like Fibonacci out his tokens, but because Ogier Talk's legendary, yeah, that doesn't work with his ability. You're right. Yeah. So something else I like that I think is silly and fun and cares about death triggers and is a non-token creature is the Gruff Triplets. Have you guys seen this little 70-cent rare from Wilds of Eldraine? It's a 6-mana mono-green creature, and it enters the battlefield. If it ain't a token, you make 2 copies that are tokens of the Gruff Triplets, and they themselves are 3/3s with trample. And when a Gruff Triplet dies, you put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to that thing's power on each creature you control named Gruff Triplets. Which means when the first Gruff Triplet dies, you have 2 6/6s with trample. When the second one dies, you have a 12/12 with trample. And if you're running token doublers, I'm not going to do the math for you. You have to do that yourself. I run Gruff Triplets in an ETB deck because I would get value off this thing by having an ETB multiple times or get multiple triggers when it enters the battlefield, making a crap ton of gruff triplets, and then you would chump block with a few of them, and suddenly you have a big board of token creatures that are all like 6/6 because of this thing's death trigger. This thing wants to die too, so this thing wants to get exiled with Bernard. The token entering won't make more copies, but it will still be named gruff triplets, so the food will get the counters too when the real one dies. I love this thing. I think this thing's really cool. I am surprised so many people slept on this thing. It's great. It's a lot of fun. Common Rider, good to see you. Common Rider wants us to run Sculpting Steel. So Sculpting Steel is especially versatile in a Bernard Ginger Sculptor deck because this thing says that the tokens we make are food golem artifact creature tokens. So we can use Sculpting Steel to make a fancy food golem of a non-token creature we already had die and exiled with Bernard's ability, and this thing can just enter the battlefield and be a copy of any artifact on the battlefield. I love Sculpting Steel. If I had an infinite amount of Sculpting Steels, I would play one in every deck. People are gonna be running artifacts in Commander. You're gonna see interplanar beacons. You're gonna see soul rings at a minimum. Casting this thing to copy someone's soul ring ain't so bad. I tell you what, like at minimal, this thing's gonna be a soul ring. Or it's going to be like a Strionic Resonator to copy some triggers. There's so many valuable artifacts in Commander, and this thing's going to have a viable target. Hey everybody, if you're just now joining me, I am BGM. I use green screen effects and graphics to make silly MTG content all over the internet. If you have a suggestion for our Bernard Ginger Sculptor deck, please put it in the comments. If you see it over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list. Cyberman Patrol. Yeah, Cyberman Patrol's rad. Hey, Kiki's a badass. Good to see you, Cyberman Patrol. Cyberman Patrol is... Okay, this thing's from Doctor Who. We're looking at the jank-ass art. This thing does have multiple printings. I think it's... So we got 2 mana, artifact creature, Sabaman. Says that artifact creatures you control got Afflict 3. Afflict is a keyword ability that means when this thing attacks, if it becomes blocked, you deal 3 damage to the guy anyway. This thing's very silly. Bernard makes artifact food golem tokens. So we got this thing, it's gonna give them all Afflict 3, they already have Trample, and they already got +2/+2. Guys, I'll be back in just a sec. Alright. And we're back. Cool. Hey, Kiki wants us to run Adrix and Nev. So I actually was lucky enough to play against a Bernard Ginger Sculptor deck on Sunday. When we play Spell Table in the Bigger Gayer Discord, someone was running Bernard. And they had Adrix and Nev in their deck, and they had it die, and they made 4 top copies of the token, right? Because they had Doubling Season out too. But because this thing is legendary, they had to sacrifice most of their tokens. And that's kind of a bummer. That's something you want to watch out for with Bernard, because it does have to be a non-token creature dying to exile it. And legendaries will still have the legend rule. Bernard doesn't get rid of the legend rule. There's ways we can use, there's things we can use to get rid of the legend rule in these colors. There's a bunch, but just something to watch out for. Adrix and Nev is cool because it's got a Ward 2 and it's like Doubling Season. If one or more tokens will be created under your control, you make twice that many tokens. This means that you make twice as many gingerbread men with Bernard's triggers. This thing's very cool, and because we're copying creatures, we're creating token copies of the creatures that die and we exile with Bernard. They're gonna be spicy. They're gonna be complex creatures. Hey yo, Voidless Void, good to see you! Insidious Fungus would be rad. Let's talk about Insidious Fungus, suggested by friend of the channel Void over on Twitch. Let's talk about the Insidious Fungus, if I can spell the Insidious Fungus. S-I-D-I-O-U-S. Insidious Fungus. Insidious Fungus. This thing's from Duskmourn. It's a 1 mana fungus creature. It's a 1/2. It's got an activated ability where you pay 2 mana and you sack him, which is great because Bernard works off death triggers. And we get to destroy an artifact, an enchantment, or we draw a card and we can put a land card. This thing's amazing, actually. What was that, like, Canker Sore thing that came out in, All Will Be One, like, Canker Bloom? It was like this, except it was more mana. This thing's rad. This thing is a utility creature. It's card draw or it's removal for problem permanents. I love this thing. Also, when it dies, we're going to use Bernard's ability to make a copy of it, and then we can use that to draw cards or remove stuff later. Or we can beat face with a Trampoline 3/3, because it's going to become a Trampoline 3/3 with Bernard's trigger. I like this thing quite a bit. That's pretty cool, actually. That's real good. It makes me think of Canker Bloom. Canker Bloom is kind of the card I think of when I think of little sacrificeable funguses. It's a 60-cent uncommon for 2 mana and mono green that came out in All Will Be 1, and you can sacrifice it for 1 mana and you can destroy some stuff. Or you could proliferate. We could proliferate. That's cool. I would run this too. This is a lot, except the other one's better, y'all. The other one's just better. Very cool suggestion. All right, what else we got? Sundering Growth. Kiki's a badass, wants us to run a Sundering Growth. Hey everybody, if you're just now joining me and you want to see other people's suggestions of what they would put in Bernard Ginger Sculptor, you can check out the Moxfield page in the link tree. Let's talk about Sundering Growth. Sundering Growth is a card that I'm not familiar with. Oh, this thing's rad, actually. I have one of these. This thing's rad. It's got a super flexible casting cost because of the hybrid mana symbols. It's instant speed, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and then populate. Populate is a keyword ability that lets you create a token creature of a token creature you have. Bernard works by making complex creatures of things that die and turns them into little gingerbread food golem creatures. And this thing, when we cast it, we can at instant speed, 2 mana, destroy a problem permanent on our opponent's battlefield, and make a populate token of our spiciest gingerbread man. This thing's pretty cool, actually. I love this thing. It's hybrid mana. It's a hybrid mana frame. That's my favorite frame. I say it every time it comes up. Great suggestion, Kiki. I appreciate it. Let's see what TikTok's got. Ooh, Erdog wants to play Protean Hulk. Let's talk about Protean Hulk. I don't think I've ever talked about Protean Hulk on the stream before. Protean Hulk is a combo enabler. It's a 6-mana creature, and it wants to die, because when Protean Hulk dies, it gives you the trigger to search your library for any number of creatures with total mana value 6 or less and slam them directly onto the battlefield. This thing is often used, for, in my experience, within a CEDH context, to find your 2 combo creatures and slam them down onto the battlefield. And because it's a death trigger, this thing is usually in like an aristocrat strategy, or it's usually in a deck that's running black, in my experience. I'm not a big CDH person, but when I see this thing on the battlefield, I know the game's about to end soon. Normally, that's what I experience when someone's running a Protean Hulk. They're trying to slam down their combo pieces. But this thing, if you're just running it as like a little value 7-drop creature that wants to die, we could run it casually in Bernard, have it die, find some silly, goofy creatures that we can sacrifice, turn into Gingerbread Man. This thing, when it dies, we'll exile it, turn it into a gingerbread person, and then sacrifice it, maybe slam down another 6 mana worth of stuff. This thing's cool. It's banned. Wait, is this banned? I'm sorry, Rayanne, we are running Moxfield. I'm pretty sure this isn't banned. Banned cards do not show up within our Commander search for cards list. At least that's what I thought I've been doing for the past few months. If it is banned, I'm sorry, y'all. Let's talk about Wargate. Wargate is a Bant sorcery. It's 3 pips and an X. And it says search your library for a permanent card with converted mana X or less, put it into play, then shuffle your library. So this thing is like Protean Hulk, but bad, because it's like, excuse me, it's just because it's more mana. It only grabs 1 thing. But you know, if your deck revolves around like a Painter's Servant and you want this thing as an extra tutor in your deck, that's cool too. If your deck relies very specifically on a singular kind of permanent, this thing can grab it. It is a tutor. It's $4, which is weird for some. This feels weird to me. It does put it directly into play, which is cool. Weird, strange. It was banned, or say, so Protean Hulk was banned a few years back. Interesting. Common Rider wants us to play a Chief of the Foundry. Chief of the Foundry. Hey, good to see you, Common Rider. Chief of the Foundry is an artifact creature. It's a 3-drop. I think this one came out originally in Kaladesh, but I'm not positive. This thing was reprinted in the Jumpstart boosters. It's a 2/3, and it says that other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. I imagine we are doing combat with the Bernard deck because we're making a big army of gingerbread creatures. They're all going to get +2/+2 and trample, and this thing's going to give them a +1/+1. And if it itself dies, and we have some kind of token doubler on the battlefield, we can make multiple copies of this thing and make a more really significant anthem for our gingerbread people. This thing's a vibe. I also love that it's 40 cents. Gunnar wants us to run an Ancient Bronze Dragon. Ancient Bronze Dragon. This. Oh, okay, cool. So this is the cheapest of the Ancient Dragons that came out in the Baldur's Gate set. This is a flying 7-mana green Elder Dragon 7/7. And whenever this thing deals combat damage to a player, you roll a d20, and then you get to slam that many +1/+1 counters wherever the hell you want to, where X is the result. This thing's cool. The other ones are spicier. I believe that this is the cheapest one. I believe the red one is the most expensive one. This thing's cool though. We can turn it into a gingerbread dragon, which is spicy. I can vibe with that. Also, it's going to put counters on things, and we're going to be doing trample combat damage anyway because of our gingerbread people having that anthem and also having trample. So this thing can just make our gingerbread people bigger and spookier. Okay, Kiki wants us to play a Progenitor Mimic. Progenitor Mimic is one of those cards I remember so fondly from when I first started playing Magic. It's a 6-drop Simic shapeshifting creature, and it enters as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except you get an upkeep trigger to make a token of it. It's very cool. I imagine we would use it in Bernard to make more tokens of our spiciest boy. If we could make multiple copies of that Ancient Bronze Dragon, we're gonna win the game. I feel like that'd be a really cool thing to make copies of. Yeah, I feel like that's the move, actually. Yeah, actually. We need some big spooky boys. The red one is really expensive. It's the only one I had to buy. Damn, Gunner, laying down the fat stacks for the Ancient Copper. Darksteel Splicer, suggested by Ryan Ortiz. Thanks for hanging out, Ryan. Darksteel Splicer. So, Golem Tribal, this thing is... Okay, this is the one I was thinking of. I was thinking of a different one. This thing was printed in the All-Will-Be-One Commander Precons. It says, whenever Darksteel Splicer or another non-token Phyrexian enters the battlefield under your control, you make a 3/3 Golem artifact creature where X is the number of opponents you have. Damn, yo, this thing wants to be in Phyrexian Tribal so bad. This thing's very cool, though. I'm sure we can have some other Phyrexian creatures. We saw that Canker Bloom earlier that had the activated ability to remove artifacts and enchantments. That's a Phyrexian. But this thing straight up just says that Golems gots indestructible. This thing turns them into Food Golem. They're Ginger Bros after they die, and Bernard gets his hand on them. And this thing's gonna give them indestructible. Yo, that first trigger, that's just gravy. This thing enters. If everyone's alive, you make 3 Golems. They are Golems, which means that they get +2/+2 and trample. So this thing enters. If everyone's alive, it makes 3 5/5 Golems with trample. Actually, this thing's awesome. Even outside of Phyrexian Tribal, this thing's awesome. Golems you control have all the gingerbread people are going to be indestructible, y'all. All right. Do all finished decks from stream go up on Moxfield or go? Starfruit. So the decks are finished when the stream ends. They're not decks. They're not something you can like post into a thing and play. They are a collection of what people would put into the decks. And what's interesting to me personally about live deck building is I get to see cards that I normally wouldn't see because there are people from all ages of Magic come in. Whenever someone puts in like a white bordered card, my blood pressure raises a little bit. And when the font's tiny, yeah, so I get to see all kinds of cards. We put them in a deck list, and you can check it out the Moxfield page. It's on the link tree to see what other people would stuff into Bernard. And a lot of people put silly, goofy stuff that you wouldn't think to put in the Commander strategy. And that's what I enjoy so much about doing live deck building. Did we put Tempered Steel? We're looking for a Tempered Steel, not Tempered Sliver. Yeah, this thing. I run this thing in a Neem Pakal, y'all. This is a 3-drop mono white enchantment, and it says that artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. This thing's spicy. It's kind of like Bernard for 3 mana, giving our little artifact creatures +2/+2. And it doesn't give trample, but it's just an anthem on a board on an enchantment. This thing flies under the radar. It turns our little food creatures into 5/5s when Bernard's on the battlefield. This thing's cool. It's only $3, and the art's rad. Great suggestion, y'all. Thank you, Common Rider. Corbin W wants us to run this here Birthing Pod. Birthing Pod. Birthing Pod searches for creatures, right? Birthing Pod. It's 4 mana. It can be a Phyrexian Pip if you want to pay 3 instead. Activate it for 2. Sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to it +1. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate only a time you can cast a sorcery. So this thing, I actually don't see this thing in play often. I remember when I first started playing Commander about 9 years ago, we would see this thing often, and it would often just fetch problem creatures to make me sad. That's what I remember about this experience. But I haven't seen this card on the battlefield in years, y'all. This one feels a little bit dated to me. There's a Vanifar creature that came out in Ravnica Allegiance that does something similar to this, and it's on a legendary. This thing's cool though. It's 15 bucks, so it's got to be good. It does search your library and shit creatures directly onto the battlefield, so that's really good. At 4 mana though, I'm not a CDH person. Does this feel CDH viable to you guys? I wouldn't know. I play at Weenie Hot Juniors. All right, and then we got, ooh, your gain. My gain on my mic is too high. You're building a Toxfield deck right now. Hey, Gorby, thank you very much. Is it better now? Please let me know if it is better now. Oswald. Oswald? What's up with Oswald? Oswald? Kara Oswald came out in Doctor Who. She's colorless. She's a 2/4. She's impossible. If you choose a color before the game begins, it is the chosen color. If a triggered ability of a doctor you control triggers, that ability triggers additional time. It has Doctor's Companion. Honestly, this just feels like a really good-ass Doctor's Companion, y'all. Okay. That's fine. I didn't know that was a colorless commander. Displaced dinosaurs. All right, we'll talk about some displaced dinosaurs. I don't love the Doctor Who cards, but I'll tell you about some displaced dinosaurs. Something notable about historic permanents is that artifacts are historic permanents, which means that it's going to trigger our displaced dinosaurs. It's a 7/7 dinosaur, and as a historic permanent enters the battlefield under your control, it becomes a 7/7 dinosaur creature. In addition is the key words here. So we could have our gingerbread people become ginger dinosaur people who start off at 7/7, and once they hit 7/7, Bernard's gonna see it, make them a 9/9, and give them trample. This thing feels like Craterhoof. Well, not quite like Craterhoof. Well, a little bit. If it gave them haste, I don't know. This thing's crazy, y'all. This thing will make our little gingerbread people 9/9s when they enter. If we got Bernard on the battlefield, y'all. This thing's sick, actually. Fiddlebender. Fiddlebender. What the heck is a Fiddlebender? Oh, Oswald Fiddlebender. My bad. I looked up the wrong Oswald. Oswald Fiddlebender is a D&D creature. He's a 2/2. He's 2 mana, and he's got an activated ability for a singular white. He's a gnome, and when you tap him, you can sacrifice an artifact, search your library for an artifact with mana value equal to 1, plus the sacrifice thing's mana value, put it directly onto the battlefield, and shuffle. This thing, okay, so we have seen quite a few artifact creatures. There are a lot of artifact creatures that care about artifact creatures, and Bernard turns the things that we die into artifact creature food golem ginger people. This thing is a way that we can use thin out our library, put some valuable creatures on the battlefield, and we can escalate each time because we can get a mana higher every time. This thing's cool, y'all. All right, and then we see... yeah, 7/7 gingerbread dinosaurs. Ooh, Scooby Doofin. Hey, Scooby Doofin. Good to see you over on Twitch. Thanks for hanging out. You want us to run a veteran explorer? Yeah, I run a veteran explorer. Is that the one that's kind of group huggy? I think that's the little... yeah, this one's group huggy if I remember right. It's a 1/1. It's a 1 mana 1/1 in green. It was printed in Battle Bond. Check out Battle Bond, y'all. It's a great set. It says when it dies, each player may search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield. Untapped. And then each player who searched their library this way shuffles. This thing's cool. If we have like a Phyrexian altar or an Ashnod's altar, we could sacrifice this thing at instant speed, grab 2 basics, put them onto the battlefield, untapped. This thing puts basics onto the battlefield untapped. It is group hug. It does do it for your friends too. Excuse me, your opponents too. This thing's cool though. Also, we could just group hug the shit out of our opponents because we can have this thing die, have it become a 3/3 trampoline gingerbread person, and do it again, and probably have enough mana to end the game. This thing's cool. I feel like the way that this card is meant to be balanced from a game design perspective is you want to kill it. You want it to die on your turn, or if you have an instant to cast, you slam the 2 basics you find onto the battlefield, untapped, and then you use it that way. That's how I imagine this card's supposed to be used. It's very cool, though. I like that it's only 40 cents, and I like that it helps your opponents. I like generating some goodwill in Commander. Haste, you say, Concordant Crossroads. Concordant Crossroads. Hey, I saw... who is that? I haven't seen... Dream Demon! Okay, Dream Demon, we're doing yours next. Concordant Crossroads is the quintessential green CDH haste enabler. It's a singular mana green world enchantment that says that creatures can attack with haste. They got haste. Imagine it says haste instead of all that confusing nonsense. That's why it's $21. It's a single mana in green, and I think of CDH when I see it. But you know what I don't think of CDH when I see it? Titan Forge. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I have no idea what Titan Forge is. Let's pull it up. Titan Forge is a 3-mana, colorless 70-cent artifact. You can activate it for 3 and put a charge counter on it, but you can activate it for its other ability. Remove 3 charge counters from Titan's Forge. Put a 9/9 colorless golem artifact creature onto the battlefield. And if that thing enters the battlefield, Bernard's gonna see it, give it +2/+2 and trample, and turn it into an 11/11 golem. This thing's sick. I don't know if I would run it though, and I'm gonna tell you why. So this thing is 3 mana, and then we have to invest 3 mana into it every turn to put charge counters on it. That's a lot. That's a large mana investment, right? So we pay 3 to cast it. We need to activate it 3 times. That's 12 mana we need to put into this thing before we generate a singular 11/11. I feel like this thing shines brighter in a proliferate deck or in a way to shit out a ton of counters on it to really take advantage of that ability. But like maybe we can find a way to untap it. Maybe we make a silly amount of mana. I don't know. But for those reasons, I'm skeptical. But also, this thing could at instant speed crap out an 11/11 with trample in a Bernard deck. So that's spicy too. How do you guys feel about this? I'm kind of torn. I'm going to tell you what, because like you need to put 12 mana in this thing before it does anything. Rise and Shine though. Rise and Shine, y'all. I have lost to Rise and Shine so many times. Oh, this thing's crazy, y'all. This thing is only ever cast for its overload cost, and it's only ever cast to win the game and murder me. That's at least how I feel. This thing is 2 mana, it's a sorcery. It says target non-creature artifact you control becomes a creature, and you put 4+1/+1 counters on it. Or if you cast it for 6, every artifact becomes a creature with 4+1/+1 counters on it. Yeah, y'all, it's great. This thing is usually used to animate clues, or treasures, or food. It's good. You could use the Sword of Truth and Justice. Truth and Justice. To proliferate. Yeah, we could use the Sword of Truth and Justice to proliferate Titan's Forge. The Sword of Protection from blue and from white says that it gives +2/+2, and the creature got protection from blue and from white. And whenever a creature deals damage with the sword on it, it can get, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, and then you proliferate. This thing's rad. This thing is $40. We could use this thing to proliferate counters on Titan's Forge. We also saw an Ancient Bronze Dragon that crafts out a ton of +1/+1 counters we can proliferate. I'm sure we saw something else with a charge counter too. It's cool. It's $40. I'd recommend a proxy before you put that money into there. Rosy Cotton, just to test it out, make sure you really want it. Rosy Cotton, though. I like Rosy Cotton. I was a Rosy Cotton I did not believe in Rosy Cotton. I thought that this card sucked when I first saw it. I'm not going to trip. I shat all over this card once upon a time. And then I ran it in a Neem Pakal, and this thing is a house. This lady's thick, and she slams out ridiculous amount of +1/+1 counters. She's 3 mana. She's a legendary mono-white creature, halfling. She's from the Lord of the Rings expansion. And she says, when it enters the battlefield, you make a food. Who cares about that food? Because whenever you create a token, period, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. That ain't her. You put them somewhere else that's not Rosy, and you make them more big and significant. We're already going to have tramply little gingerbread people. Rosy Cotton is going to bake them up, slam a bunch of counters on them whenever we make some more. This thing's great. I would run the hell out of this. Also, if it dies, we just turn her into a ginger person. Thank you very much for the follow, Irish. I appreciate it. And thank you guys so much for the 130 likes. I appreciate it. Yeah, you... Damn, Gunner. Gunner, how long you been playing? Throne of Geth. Throne of Geth. Throne of Geth. I thought Geth was a black card. Okay. 2 mana, Throne of Geth. It's an artifact. It's got an activated ability. We can tap it, sack an artifact, proliferate. There we go! Alright, we got some proliferate strats here. This thing feels good. I've actually never seen this proliferate card before. The art's a vibe, y'all. The art's very fucking cool. It's $1. You tap it, sacrifice an artifact to instant speed, proliferate, maybe slam down some loyalty counters, maybe put some charge counters on that Golem Forge. This thing's cool. This thing's a vibe. Also, because so many artifact creatures care about artifact creatures already, we could use this thing to sacrifice something that's already an artifact creature, turn it into a gingerbread person. Cool suggestion. I also like that this one's only $1. Very sick. All right. Hey, everybody. If you are just now joining me, I am BGM. I am a video editor and streamer. And on live deck building, we talk about our commander over here. And if you have any suggestions for what you would put in Bernard, the Ginger Sculptor, please put it in the comments, y'all. If you see your comment over here, it will be put into a Moxfield deck list. And if you want to see what other people are suggesting for Bernard Ginger Sculptor, check out the Moxfield page. It's on the link tree on my TikTok profile. We are trying to spell Feldgriff and talk at the same time. I am not that powerful. P-H-E-L-D-A-G-R-I-F-F. Feldgriff! Come on, Feldgriff, where you at? Okay, well, can I please get a spell check on Feldgriff? What are we proliferating? So we're talking about this thing called Titan Forge. So we saw this thing, and I was skeptical about it, because this thing, you cast it for 3. You need to activate it 3 times to put counters on it. And you do need to remove 3 counters from it to make a 9/9. When you do make a 9/9 in Bernard, though, it becomes an 11/11 with Trample, which is spicy. But you need 3 to cast it, and you need to activate it 3 times to put counters on it as God planned to. But if we can proliferate this thing, we can cheat out those golems early. And I feel like that's the viability. Because if we want to invest 12 mana to shit out a single 11/11, that's not super great, in my opinion. Parallel Lives. Parallel Lives is rad and fair, because if an effect would put 1 or more tokens onto the battlefield under your control, it puts twice that many of those tokens onto the battlefield, onto the battlefield instead. Well, excuse me, it is not fair. I was thinking about Primal Vigor. This one's cheaty as hell. It's a 4 mana enchantment in green that doubles tokens, but only for you. If you want to run a fair token doubler, you got to run that Primal Vigor. Primal Vigor is cool. It's kind of a group hug card. It's a 5 mana enchantment in green. If 1 or more tokens would be created, twice that many tokens are created. And it works on your opponents too, so they kind of like it. And it also works on +1/+1 counters. It is a friendly doubling season. I love Canoptek Scarab Swarm. Canoptek Scarab Swarm is a wonderful card. I got to play it on a charity stream once, and I exiled like 40 cards from graveyards, and I made like 30 scarabs. It was so cool. Because they were wheeling, they were making us draw our hands and then discard them so many times, and then I drew that Canoptek Scarab Swarm, and I had Panharmon. I doubled the trigger. Anyway, this is Canoptek Scarab Swarm, and this thing is like $2 more expensive every time we look at it. It's a 4 mana artifact insect creature, and it came out in the mono black precon, the Necron precon from the Warhammer 40k expansion. And this thing enters the battlefield. It is itself a flying 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to exile a player's graveyard. It can be your own if you got a bunch of lands and artifacts in there, and you want to do that because if you got a bunch of lands and artifacts in a graveyard, you're going to make a ton of flying 1/1s when this thing enters. Equal to the amount of lands and artifacts, right? Yeah, artifacts or lands make bugs. This thing's very cool. This thing is a board on a 4/4 in the late game, especially if there's like a mill player or a self-mill player on the battlefield. Canoptek Scarab Swarm is crazy. It's also graveyard hate, so if your opponents are playing graveyard deck themes, you can exile their graveyard with this, and even if you don't make so many bugs, you still exile their graveyard. It's also a flying blocker. I love that. This card is so good, y'all. It's so good. It makes me sad that it's getting more expensive. Oh, we got a spell check on the Feldgriff. Okay, so we're gonna do P-H-E-L-D-D-A Feldgriff. Yeah, this thing. Let's talk about it. This thing's 4 mana. It's a Bant commander. It's got 3 activated abilities. You can give it flying until end of turn. Target opponent gains 2 life. You can return it to its owner's hand, and target opponent draws a card. Or you can give it trample until end of turn, and you put a hippo token into play under target opponent's control, and it's a 1/1. You can give people hippos. There is a lot of Feldgriff strategies where you've just given people hippos. It's a meme deck. It's silly and goofy. It's often a group hug deck. It's very silly. It's a very silly hippo. And there's also the questing Feldgriff, which is just an updated version. It's cool too. It's not as good as that one because it's not legendary. Questing Feldgriff should have been legendary. Red Lemming, good to see you. You say Chronozoa. Chronozoa, that sounds like a Doctor Who-ass card. It's not. Chronozoa is not a Doctor Who-ass card. It's a 4 mana blue creature flying illusion. And it's got Vanishing 3. That means that it comes into play with 3 reverse time counters on it. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you remove a time counter on it. When it ain't got no more counters on it, it leaves. When this thing is put into a graveyard from play, if it had no time counters on it, you put 2 tokens into play that are copies of it. That's rad, actually. Okay, so because we're probably going to have an altar, or we're going to have something that has the ability to sacrifice stuff on it, we're going to have some kind of sack outlet. We could sacrifice Chronozoa before it gets rid of the vanishing counters. And this thing itself is a relevant body. It is a 3/3, and if we can kill it, we get 2 more. And if we can kill the gingerbread one, we can get 2 more. They all enter with vanishing counters. So cons about this card is you do need a lot of dice, and you do got to pay attention to the vanishing counters. But if we're going to have sack outlets, when we kill it, we make 2. Except we're going to make 3 if our commander's on the battlefield. So we make 3. Maybe we kill a few more. Actually, if we have a sack outlet, this thing kind of goes infinite, right? If we have a free sack outlet. When it's put into a graveyard from play, if it had no time counters on it, put 2 tokens into play. There are copies of it. I feel like this thing kind of goes infinite by itself, doesn't it? Weird. Okay. Ancient Gold Dragon. You like them dragons, don't you, Gun? Alright, Ancient Gold Dragon. Ancient Gold Dragon. I did not spell that correctly. Ancient Gold Dragon. Oh, this is the white one! I like this one. Okay, this is the 7-mana white Ancient Gold Dragon. It's quite a bit better than the green one, because instead of making a bunch of counters and placing them all over the place, you're going to be making a little 1 blue fairy dragon creature tokens with flying equal to the result. This thing deals combat damage. You roll a d20. You make that many blue little 1/1 flyers. This thing's great. It's a 7/10 all by itself. And if we can make spicy gingerbread versions of it, very cool. I like it. Honestly, I don't like this art though. I don't vibe with the art. I don't like this. This part feels weird. This part feels. Well, anyway, that's just me. Yeah. Well, oh, were you running an Dragon deck, Connor? Blade Splicer. Hell yeah, Blade Splicer. Blade Splicer's rad. Yeah, this thing gives our golems first strike, and when it enters the battlefield, you make a 3/3 Phyrexian golem. We saw a different Phyrexian thing that cared about Phyrexian golems, and that thing gives your golems indestructible. This thing, though, because it makes the golem on an ETB, it enters, if Bernard's on the battlefield, it made a 5/5 with trample, and if we kill it, it itself becomes a golem, and it'll make another 5/5 when the token enters off the Bernard trigger. This thing's rad, yo. Thank you, Wazzlebug MTG, for the follow. I appreciate it. Wazzlebug is a fun thing to say. Alright. Ooh, Scooby Doofin, what do you got? Kira, Great Glass Spinner. Kira, Great Glass Spinner. Kira, Great Glass Spinner is a 3-mana legendary spirit. It's a 2/2 and it flies. It says that creatures you control got the ability of whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability for the first time in a turn, counter that spell or ability. This thing is kind of like ward stop it the first time no matter what. The art's trippy as hell. I can't even really tell what's going on in the art, but it's sick, yo. It protects your creatures. It protects your creatures. It counters spells that target them. Very cool. I have seen this in the command zone for a deck, and it was just like a blue combo deck. This thing's interesting. What would you guys would just run blue creatures for the commander for this? What would you do to build this? Weird. Maybe we should do it on live one night. Lol Tim says an etheric amplifier. Etheric amplifier. Oh, this thing's coming out in Aether Drift in a day or two. It's a 3-mana colorless artifact. It itself is a mana rock that can tap for 1 of any color. You can pay for, you chap it, you choose 1. Activate only as a sorcery. You double the number of each kind of counters on target permanent, or you double the number of each kind of counter you have. Cool, so let's talk about counters we might have as a player. Poison counters, probably don't be doubling that, but experience counters, there are a lot of legendary creatures that care about something called experience counters, and those are counters that the player gets. This thing could double experience counters, which could be very cool. That's probably why, let's check out that set symbol. Yeah, that's probably why it's coming out in the Aether Drift Commander set, instead of the set proper. This thing's cool, though. It's a 3-mana mana rock. The art's rad as hell. It can do counter doubling on permanents, so it can double the number of counters on planeswalkers. It can double the amount of counters on planeswalkers. What the is this thing? Okay, I hate this actually. This thing's gonna get. I feel like this 3-mana rock is gonna get pricey. So straight off the rip, it's a 3-mana rock that taps for 1 of any color. That's pretty. That's viable by itself. It has an activated ability, activate only as a sorcery. At least it's not instant speed. Double the number of each kind of counter on a target permanent. That can be a planeswalker. This thing can cause planeswalkers to ult immediately. Or you can double the number of each kind of counters you have. I'm not sure what kind of counters we would have outside of experience counters, but doubling the amount of experience counters we have for 4 mana is also coconuts. This thing's sick, actually. I wonder which deck this is going to be in. I kind of hope the zombie one, y'all. Wazzlebug MTG is suggesting a Volatile Stormdrake. Volatile Stormdrake. Volatile Stormdrake is a 2 mana blue $2 Modern Horizons 3 Drake. It has flying hexproof from activated and triggered abilities. And when this thing enters the battlefield, exchange control of Volatile Stormdrake and target creature an opponent controls. If you do, you get 4 energy. Then you sacrifice this creature unless you pay energy equal to its mana value. This thing's cool. I imagine it wants to be in an energy deck, but it's a 2 mana Drake that can just steal 4 drops. It just steals 4 drops, right? Exchange control of volatile and target creature. Has to be a creature, can't be a permanent. This thing's cool though. I've definitely had some shit yoinked by this Drake before, especially in an energy deck. When they can start paying more than 4 energy and grab your spiciest boy off this thing's trigger, that's the real value of this thing. Hey everybody, if you're just now joining me, I am BGM, Bigger Gator Magic. I use green screen effects to make silly little MTG content all over the internet, and if you're having a good time, I'm glad you are. If you want to see any of the cards that we're talking about today, head to the Moxfield deck list in the profile. A guy that exists, thank you so much. I just hit 10K. Thank you, a guy that exists. I appreciate that. I did it by baiting the bears. Let's talk about Mockingbird. Mockingbird came out in Bloomborough. It's a blue creature. It's got 1 blue pip and an X. And the X is going to be for the CMC of the thing you want this thing to copy. Because you can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield with mana value X or less equal to the amount of mana spent to cast Mockingbird. That thing also flies and is a bird in addition to its other types. This thing's $8? Oh, why is this thing $8? Guys, I'm not gonna lie. I have 2 of these sitting in a binder, and I'm like, that's cool. But there are a lot of blue effects that can copy creatures, and a lot of them don't cause you to have. A lot of them don't require you to pay their mana costs. This thing requires you to pay their mana costs. I don't know. I'd rather run a Spark Double, to be honest with you, over this thing. Let's check Spark Double. How much do you guys think Spark Double is these days? Spark Double is blue. It's 4 mana. It came out in the War of the Spark expansion. It enters the battlefield. It can be a copy. Okay, this thing, I would recommend this thing over Spark Double in a commander deck, possibly because it can just copy your commander. Mockingbird non-bows with legendaries, and that makes me sad. Golem Foundry. Golem Foundry. It's pretty jacked, bro. What's pretty jacked? Golem Foundry. Is Golem Foundry that card we talked about earlier? No, it's not. So this 3 mana artifact for 60 cents says that whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may put a charge counter on Golem Foundry. Remove 3 charge counters from Golem Foundry. Put a 3/3 Golem artifact creature onto the battlefield. Whenever you cast an artifact spell. Cool. So we have seen a lot of artifacts. We've seen a lot of artifact creatures that care about artifact creatures, and when you're running artifact creatures that care about artifact creatures, because Bernard makes artifact creatures. Whenever a non-token creature we control dies, we can have Bernard we can exile it and have Bernard make a 1/1 version of it that's a food golem, also known as a gingerbread person. And these gingerbread people, because of Bernard's static ability, get +2/+2 and trample. And this thing can make 3/3 golem. So when this thing shits out a 3/3 golem, it's actually a 5/5 with trample because of our commander Bernard. Oh, Parallel Lives. We saw Parallel Lives a minute ago. Let's plug back up. Parallel Lives. Parallel Lives. Oh. Saracel Lives. Parallel Lives. Thank you very much for the follow, Joshua. I appreciate it. I'm BGM, a video editor and a streamer. We're talking about cards. If you want to see the cards that people are putting in Bernard, you can check out the Moxfield deck list on the link tree in the profile. Parallel Lives is a token doubler. It's 4 mana. It's mono green. It's $40. And it doubles the amount of tokens you crap out. This thing's great. It's a 4 mana token doubler. It's one of the best cards in mono green, in my opinion, especially in Commander. We have seen cards like Parallel Lives that I often compare to it. Parallel Lives is a much cheaper version of, Primal Vigor is a much cheaper version of getting the Parallel Lives effect, but Primo Vigor is bad because it helps your opponents too. It says that if tokens would be made, twice that many tokens are made, and if +1/+1 counters getting plopped down, twice that many counters get plopped. This version was printed in the Black Panther Marvel Secret Lair. And I think it's only $5. Nope, this one's $8. Illustrious Wanderglyph. Illustrious Wanderglyph is rad. I like Illustrious Wanderglyph. This thing came out in the Caverns of Ixalan expansion. I have it in Indian Pakal. It's a... Let's talk about this. Is Wanderglyph. It says that artifact creatures get like +2/+2, right? Wanderglyph. Yeah, the Illustrious Wanderglyph. It's 5 mana. It came out in the Caverns of Ixalan precons. It's a 2/2 with Ascend, and as long as you got the city's blessing, other artifact creatures you control got +2/+2. The city's blessing means that you have 10 or more permanents. This includes your lands. So as you've got 10 cards on the battlefield, this thing, it gives your artifact creatures +2/+2, and that's great because Bernard makes artifact creatures when non-token creatures die. It'll get +2/+2 and trample from Bernard and +2/+2 over here. So if we have this and this on the battlefield, our artifact creatures are tramply 5/5s, and that's pretty good, yo. We only need a few of those to really close out a game. Also, this thing's great because at the beginning of your upkeep, you create a 1/1 gnome artifact creature token. Notable about this token that he makes, it's just going to be a 1/1. It's going to be pumped up to a 3/3 because of itself. Bernard does not buff the gnomes because the gnomes are neither food nor are they golems. Thank you, Gunnar, for the suggestion. Scooby Doofin wants us to run an Armada Worm. Armada Worm is not something I'm familiar with. Okay, we got a Celestian Worm for 6 mana. It's a tramply 5/5, and when this thing enters the battlefield, you put a 5/5 green tramply worm token on. Great. This thing is a 6 mana spell, and it gives us 10 mana worth of tramply power. And when this thing dies, it's going to enter again and slam out another tramply 5/5, and it itself is going to be a tramply 3/3. This thing's great. So if we cast it for 6 mana, it enters, it makes the worm, and then we kill it, and it makes another worm. So for 6 mana, we can get a total of 18 power, all of it trample off of this worm. That is very cool, and that's if we have a sack outlet. It does, okay, so there's a con about this worm. There's a very important con about this worm. It looks like a dick, and that's all. That's the only con. It's a little bit dicky. Let's try about my Rel Shield of Archive. My Rel Shield of Archive. My Rel Shield of Archive is a rad-ass card, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's like 20 bucks. It's a CEDH viable commander. It's mono white, and it says that your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. And it also, okay, it's 30 bucks. It's not quite 40 bucks. Legendary mono white 4-drop legendary human soldier 3/4. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of creatures, artifacts, or enchantments. And whenever this thing attacks, we make that many we make X 1/1 soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers we got. This thing's great. It's a house. I had this as a mono white deck, and I took it apart because it was mean. This thing's a great card, y'all. If you care about making a ton of little artifact creatures, this thing will do that for you. It's real good. Unfortunately, the artifact soldiers are not foods, nor are they golems. I'm not even going to try to say that name, Gunner, but okay. I'll type it in, but I ain't trying to say it. Vexier. Vexier Iktekikit. Sure. Can I please get a spell check on that? Vexyr. It's not coming up. All right. But Dream Demon, just tell him your eyes are up here. Just tell him your eyes are up here. All right. Malkador, Purity Overseer. Malkador, Purity Overseer. This thing's rad. This thing's an elephant. I was excited about the elephant. I wish the elephant was better than he is, because he's cool. He's a 50-cent Azorius legendary Phyrexian elephant wizard, and he says when he enters the battlefield, you make yourself a little 3/3 Phyrexian golem artifact creature token. And at the beginning of your end step, if one or more artifacts enter the battlefield under your control this turn, you make a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian golem. Notable about the things that this thing makes, it's making 3/3 golems, meaning that Bernard is going to bump them up into 5/5 tramplers. This thing's good. Hell yeah. Very good in Bernard. Just tell me your rat-ass card. Someone... Rat-ass card. Curse of Swine... Curse of Swine... I've lost to Curse of Swine before. Curse of Swine can be a really impactful card. It's a blue X spell, and it says exile X target creatures. For each creature exile this way, its controller makes a little green 2/2 pig creature. This thing is a one-sided board wipe. Usually. You're putting a bunch of mana into it, and you're wiping your opponent's board. This thing is significant, because all our food creatures are going to be at least 3/3s, and they're all going to have tramplers, and we're going to nuke all our opponent's boards into 2/2s, making them pigs. They're going to get trampled on by our 3/3 gingerbread tramply people. It's going to be very cool. I really like that this thing functions so good with Bernard, because Bernard makes them 3/3s, gives them trample, and this just turns them into 2/2s, meaning that even if they block, they're going to die, and we're still going to deal damage. Very cool suggestion. Thank you for the suggestion. Ooh, Kiki wants us to run Scoot Swarm. Let's get to scooting. We're gonna start scooting with this 3-mana green insect creature. It's $4 and it's landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you make a 1/1 green insect creature token. Unless you have 6 or more lands, and then you make a copy of Scoot Swarm. If you have never seen the joy of scooting, play Scoot Swarm on Arena. Scoot Swarm is the reason that Arena has a token cap. This thing's crazy abusable, especially in a landfall deck. Would recommend. It's only $4. Goatman wants me to run an Encroaching Mycosynth. Encroaching Mycosynth. Encroaching Microsynth. Encroaching Mycosynth came out in All-Will-Be-1. It's a 4-mana blue artifact. It says that non-land permanents you control are artifacts in addition to their other types. The same is true for permanent spells you control and non-land permanent cards that you own that aren't on the battlefield, like cards in your graveyard or in exile or in your library. This thing's cool. If we care about artifact strategies, we can use this thing to make, maybe there's like a card that says search your library for all your artifacts, slam them on the battlefield. We can use this thing and turn that thing into our whole deck. Honestly though, look at the art. Look how messed up that art is. Oh, it's got flavor text. Careful, however they might look, they're not human. A step too close and they'll drag you in. Well, that's awful. Let's get out of here. Rex here is a custom card. Alright, I'll run you a Zoetic Glyph. We've talked about Zoetic Glyph on the stream before. Zoetic Glyph. It's been good hanging out with you, Gunnar. Thank you for so many suggestions tonight. I appreciate it. Zoetic Glyph came out in the Caverns of Ixalan. It's a little 3-mana blue aura, and it says enchanted creature is a golem, is a 5/4, in addition to its other types, and when it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you discover 3. Discover 3 is kind of like a cascade trigger, except that if you don't want to cast it, you can put it into your hand instead of exiling it for the rest of the game. This thing's cool. It turns your thing into a 5/4. Even if we're putting it on something that's already a ginger person. Actually, we don't put this on a ginger. Don't put this on a ginger person. Put it on a creature that is not yet a ginger person, because it'll buff their power into a 5/4. And when they're a golem, Bernard's Anthem will trigger, or not, won't trigger. It'll become online, and it'll give it trample and +2/+2, making it a 7/6, making it a 7/6 trampler. Very cool. Bernie for sure. Bernie for sure? Who's Bernie? Who the heck is Bernie? Bernie the token daddy. Yeah, honestly, Bernard. Yeah, we can call Bernard Bernie the token daddy. Master's Guide Mural. Dream Demon wants us to run a Master's Guide Mural. Master's Guide Mural. Master's Guide Mural is a uncommon artifact in Azorius colors that came out in the Caverns of Ixalan expansion. When it enters the battlefield, you make yourself a 4/4 blue and white golem artifact creature token. Great, so Bernard's going to turn that into his tramply 6/6 for 5 mana. That's pretty good, and then we can craft with artifacts. Crafting with artifacts means you exile this artifact, exile another artifact you control, or an artifact card from your graveyard, return it transformed. What the hell is it going to be? Oh shit, is that a golem? It's not a golem, but it makes golems, so in a way that's almost better. The art's a vibe, yo. This is really cool. I like that art. That's pretty sick. It's an artifact that makes more golems, and when those golems enter off the ability, they become 6/6s with trample off of Bernard Ginger Sculptor's ability. Or, excuse me, Bernie the Cookie Daddy. He's very cool, yo. I like this. This is a good card. Very good card. Alright, guys, I'm getting a little tired if you cannot tell by how many times I'm saying yo and rad tonight. We're going to take a few more cards. We're only going to go for an hour tonight. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me. Once again, I am Bigger Gayer Magic, or BGM, and I just realized Moxfield is misspelled. Thanks for hanging out with me. We're going to do a few more cards and call it a night. Mist Hollow Griffin, though. Mist Hollow Griffin. Mist Hollow Griffin is our number 5 tonight. It is a 4-drop blue griffin. Kind of looks like a sphinx. Has flying, and you may cast it from exile. That's... Oh my god. That is so good. That is so good. That is so good. Alright, let's talk about it. So, Bernard works off a triggered ability that when a non-token creature we control dies, like this griffin, we exile it, and when we do that, we make a ginger person version of this thing, except this thing is just a 3/3 flyer that we can keep casting out of exile. I love this thing. Very cool. Yeah, and that is the one thing I kind of have a little bit of a hang up with our boy Bernie over here. Bernie exiles the things that we're making tokens of, so this thing comes back, and if once we cast this thing, and once we exile it, and we keep doing it, and we keep sacrificing it, and we keep making flying ginger versions of this thing, that's great. We won't need any more creatures for the rest of the game. Honestly, we could just keep recasting this Mist Hollow Griffin. I also love that it's $2. This might be my favorite card in the deck, because it's so weird. Because Bernard exiles the creature, this thing's amazing. If we get hit by a board wipe, it's not like we can recur the things we sacrificed out of the graveyard with the Bernard deck, because Bernard exiles them. I love this thing. Must include. 10 out of 10. Who put this in here? Who put the Mist Hollow? Scooby Doofin. Scooby Doofin, that's for you. Thank you for the suggestion. That one's rad. That is our number 5 today. And Gunnar is going to give us our number 4 with a monster manual. Monster Manual. Monster Manual. Monster Manual is 4 mana, it's green, it's an artifact, it's got an adventure. We can cast it for the 3 mana sorcery adventure part, and we can mill 5 cards and return a creature card mill this way into your hand. Okay, cool, that feels like a little bit of card advantage. We grab 1 creature, we mill some other stuff. We can also activate this thing for 2 mana. So 4 to cast, 2 to activate for 6 mana investment. Then you put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. That's pretty cool. We have seen we saw the Ancient White Dragon. We saw the Ancient Green Dragon. We saw a few other pricey creatures. I think we saw like an 8 mana Sphinx in the beginning of the live. And we can use this thing to slam out expensive creatures. If we want to be making big, spicy ginger boys, we could use this thing to cheat them onto the battlefield. Precursor Golem. Precursor Golem is our number 3 pick of the night. Oh, this thing's rad, actually. I kind of want to build Golem Tribal now. This is way better than I thought it was going to be. It's a lot more supported than I thought it was going to be. It's a 5 mana Golem 3/3. It's 50 cents, and when it enters the battlefield, you make 2 other Golems. Great. So for 5 mana, we get 15 power, and all of it has trample because of Bernard's ability. And whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell that targets a single golem, that player copies that spell for each other golem that spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those golems. Never mind. Maybe don't play this, because this thing says that if someone can like shock and deal 2 damage, or like maybe if they have like it's swords to plowshares, they can swords to plowshares your entire board with this thing. I find it very silly and funny. I feel like it'd be very fun to run in like a Zada Hedron Grinder deck where everything's not a golem, because when everything's a golem, spot removal becomes a board wipe. But this thing's very cool. If you want to live on the edge, you can slam this thing out and you can get 15 power, all of it with trample with Bernard. But man, is that a huge liability in that second ability. Alright, that's our number. This is spicy. The last few cards have been so good. Okay. Divine Visitation. Okay, Divine Visitation. Yeah, okay, so we're gonna kind of leave Golem Tribal, and we're just gonna play Angels. This thing, I'm so glad this thing got a reprint. This card used to be like 30 bucks. I'm so glad it got a reprint in Ravnica Remastered. It's a 5-mana mono white enchantment, and if you would make a token, you ain't making that token. You're making a 4/4 flying vigilant angel creature token instead. So this thing says that instead of making ginger people, we're making 4/4 vigilant flying angels. And honestly, that's perfectly fine. Most of the cards are built to work with the artifact creature strategy, but honestly, if we're just making 4/4 flying vigilant angels, I feel like that's better. I feel like that's better, because they fly. They can block flying, they have vigilance, so they can attack and block. If we play that blue card that turns everything into an artifact, they're going to be artifact angels. And they'll work with our artifact creature synergies. Very cool suggestion, Kiki. You are our number 2 pick with Divine Visitation. Alright, everybody, before our very last card, one last time for tonight, I am Bigger Gayer Magic, or BGM. I use green screen effects and other graphics to make silly little content about Magic the Gathering all over the internet. And during lives, we do live deck building. If you want to see any of the cards that people suggested for Bernard the Ginger Sculptor, check out the Moxfield page on my TikTok profile. Let's talk about Sundering Titan. Oh my god, Sundering Titan's banned. Is Sundering Titan the thing that enters and destroys a basic land of every type? That thing's banned in Commander. Yeah, so this is what happened when you type a banned card in. Alright, so Sundering Titan is not going to be our number 1. Okay, Registeel, we're going to come back. You still get the number 1 pick, and we're going to run an Iroas, God of Victory. Iroas, God of Victory. I believe this is the Boros Minotaur God? Not Minotaur. It's Iroas. Oh no! I-R-O-A-S. Iroas, God of Victory. Okay, if Iroas is not the name of the card. Alright, Iroas unfortunately is. Well, let's try God of Victory. God of Victory. No H, just God of Victory. Unfortunately, God of Victory is not coming up either. Oh my gosh, Goatman! Sovereign Okenek is your last card. Sovereign Okenek is gonna be our last card of the night. This thing's rad. I believe it's a cat. It is a cat. This cat's rad. It's a mythic cat. It's $5. It's 4 mana. It's in Celestian colors, and it was printed in the Caverns of Ixalan expansion. It has Ward 2. It's a cat noble, and it says whenever this thing attacks, for each creature you control with power greater than its base power, you slam that many +1/+1 counters on that creature equal to the difference. So I imagine the way that we're going to be using this card within our Bernie the Cookie Daddy deck, it's going to make all our cookie people +2/+2 in Trampoly, which means they're going to have power greater than their base to power because their base power is 1. And if we have our other artifact anthems that make our artifact creatures bigger, this thing's going to have an even more impactful trigger and can often almost just double the power of our shit each turn. Also, because it's putting counters on them, if this thing sticks around, it kind of just, like, escalates every turn. Because the counters are going to keep the base power... Excuse me, it's going to make the actual power a lot higher than the base power. And every turn that this thing's on the battlefield, you're going to be stacking more and more counters on your board. This thing's rad. It's $5. It was printed in the Caverns of Ixalan expansion, and his sword looks very gnarly. This thing is rad art, actually. Very cool suggestion. That is going to be our last card of the night, y'all. I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me for the last time. I am BGM, or Bigger Gayer Magic. I'm a video editor and streamer, and I make Magic the Gathering nonsense all over the internet in a gay way. And if you want to hang out with me during live deck building, head on over to the link tree. Hit the Moxfield profile if you want to see the cards that were suggested tonight, and head on over to the Discord if you want to vote on what commander we talk about tomorrow. Thank you very much for the follow, Registeel. I hope you all have a great night.